Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I'm excited to introduce our presentation titled The Hack Driver. This session will explore the intriguing world of hacking and the role of the hack driver in it. We'll cover the key concepts, some fascinating stories, and the implications of this activity. So, let's get started and dive into the fascinating subject of the hack driver. All right, before we dive into the main content, let's take a moment to go over some key points. This slide is really about setting the stage for what's to come, so I want you to keep these ideas in mind. First, we'll start with a quick reminder that before we read, it's helpful to have some context. Then, we'll move into the section called Let's Read, which is where we'll explore the actual material. Next, we'll look at about the author, because understanding who wrote this content gives us valuable insight into the perspective and purpose behind it. And finally, we have contents, which is a brief overview of what's included in this section. These points are fundamental because they help us engage more deeply with the material and connect everything to the bigger picture of the presentation. So, as we go along, keep these concepts in mind. They're the foundation for understanding and applying what we'll learn today. Let's take a moment to talk about the author behind this work. Understanding who they are helps us appreciate the perspective and expertise they bring to the topic. The author's background, experiences, and motivations are all key factors that shape the insights shared here. By knowing a bit about their journey, we can better connect their ideas to the broader themes of this presentation. It's always interesting to see how their personal story influences their approach and the value they add. So, as we move forward, keep in mind that the author's perspective is rooted in real-world experience and a genuine passion for the subject. This connection enriches the content and makes it more relatable and credible. Harry Sinclair Lewis, born in 1885 and passing away in 1951, was a prominent American novelist, short story writer, and playwright. He's especially notable because he was the first American to win the Nobel Prize in Literature, which highlights his significant contribution to the literary world. Some of his most well-known novels include Hike and the Aeroplane, The Job, an American novel, and Free Air, among others. These works often explore American society and culture, offering insightful and sometimes satirical perspectives. Connecting this to our overall theme, Lewis's achievements and his influential writing style exemplify the power of literature to reflect and critique society, inspiring us to look deeper into the stories we tell about ourselves. Before we dive into the main content, I want to set the stage a bit. This slide is titled Before We Read, and it's really about understanding the context and key points to keep in mind. As we go through this presentation, remember that these foundational ideas will help us better grasp the more detailed information later on. So, let's focus on what's most important here. This is about preparing ourselves mentally, making sure we're aligned with the overall theme, and highlighting the core concepts that will guide us through the rest of the discussion. Keeping these points in mind will ensure we get the most out of what's to come. So, in this slide, we see a young lawyer who arrives in a small village with a specific task. He's there to serve a summons on Oliver Lutkins. Now, what's interesting is that he's not alone. He's accompanied by a friendly hack driver who offers to take him around the village to find Lutkins. The question that naturally arises is, does the lawyer actually find Lutkins? And more importantly, who is Lutkins? This setup really highlights themes of perception, trust, and perhaps even deception, which are central to understanding how we often judge people based on initial appearances. It also ties into the larger idea of how assumptions can be misleading, especially in unfamiliar settings. So, as we move forward, keep in mind how this story challenges our expectations and perceptions about people's true identities. Let's read through this together. On this slide, I want to focus on some key points that are really important to understand. As we go through, I'll explain each one thoroughly, but in a way that's easy to follow. The goal here is to connect these ideas to the overall theme of our presentation, so they make sense within the bigger picture. I'll highlight the most important concepts so you can see how they fit together and why they matter. Remember, this is about making the information clear and engaging, so feel free to ask questions or think about how these points relate to your own experience. Now, let's dive in and explore these ideas together. On this slide, we see a mix of different concepts and scenes. First, there's a mention of a poker game, which is a popular type of card game involving strategy and luck. Then, we come across the word hack, which historically refers to a horse-drawn vehicle or horse cart, something that often helped people get around in earlier times. We also see the phrase hangs out, meaning to spend time doing nothing in particular, often casually or informally. This phrase is used in the context of someone knowing where Lutkins tends to spend his time. The dialogue reveals a plan. Someone says, "I'll tell you what, I've got a hack. I'll get it out and we can drive around together and find Lutkins. I know most of the places he hangs out." This shows the character's intention to use a horse-drawn vehicle to locate Lutkins, who seems to be someone hard to find. Another character expresses urgency about catching a train back to the city, emphasizing the importance of their plans and the secretive nature of their task. The conversation also mentions Lutkins as a hard fellow to catch, always up to something, probably involved in some mischief or at least difficult to track down. There's a brief mention that Lutkins might be trying to start a poker game in Fritz's shop, connecting back to the earlier mention of poker. The narrator then states directly, "I want to find a man named Oliver Lutkins," highlighting the main goal. Moving to the next part, the narrator recounts the disappointment of expecting a charming, simple country village in New Mullion, only to find muddy streets and plain shops. The only pleasant sight was a cheerful delivery man who seemed to genuinely enjoy meeting people. This part underscores how expectations can often differ from reality, especially in unfamiliar places. The narrator rejoices when sent 40 miles into the country to serve a legal summons on Oliver Lutkins, who had ignored previous letters, showing persistence in the pursuit. Finally, the slide discusses the narrator's experience working in law, serving legal documents like summons and briefs. It describes the work as shadowy and unpleasant, sometimes even dangerous, contrasting sharply with the glamorous idea of being a lawyer. Instead, the narrator had to seek out people in the city's less glamorous corners, which was both challenging and revealing. So overall, this slide connects themes of pursuit, expectation versus reality, and the often gritty side of legal and investigative work, all woven into a story about tracking down Lutkins. "So," he said, "I don't want to interfere, young fellow, but my guess is that you want to collect some money from Lutkins. He never pays anybody a cent. He still owes me 50 cents on a poker game I was fool enough to play with him. He's not really a bad person," he continued, "but it's hard to make him part with his money. If you try to collect from him while he's dressed in those fancy clothes, he'll get suspicious and probably try to get away." He offered to go into Fritz and ask for Lutkins himself so I could stay out of sight behind him. What's really interesting here is how open and friendly he was, so much so that I felt a warmth of affection towards him. Of course, I knew he wanted to help me with my task, but his kindness seemed genuine. I was glad that the money I was earning for this job would go to such a good fellow. Eventually, I bargained down my rate to $2 an hour, which was quite fair. And then he brought out a large black box on wheels from his house nearby. That's basically a horse cart. He called it the carriage, and his big smile made me feel like I was an old friend. This part really highlights how welcoming these villagers are. They're so ready to help a stranger. And of course, he had already made it his personal mission to find Oliver Lutkins for me, which was a huge help. Yes, Lutkins is just as likely to be there as anywhere else. He plays a lot of poker and is quite skilled at deceiving people. Bill seemed to admire Lutkins' talent for dishonesty, which I found interesting. I felt that if Bill had been a policeman, he would have caught Lutkins respectfully and perhaps even jailed him with some regret. Then I asked, "All right, Bill, shall we proceed to Fritz?" He responded by saying that most folks around here call him Bill or Magnuson. He told me that his business is called William Magnuson Fancy Carting and Hacking. I loved this detail about him. You see, by myself I might never have found Lutkins, but with the hack driver's knowing help, I was confident I could track down my man. I decided to trust him and told him that I wanted to serve the summons on Lutkins. I explained that Lutkins had refused to be a witness, even though his information could have quickly settled our case. The driver listened earnestly, which showed me he was sincere in wanting to help. And at the end, he hit me on the shoulder and laughed, saying, "Well, we'll give Brother Lutkins a little surprise." This moment highlights how the hack driver's trust and understanding played a key role in the scheme. It's a good example of how building trust and working together can help achieve a goal, especially in tricky situations like this. So in this part of the story, we see the idea of lingering, which means waiting around for a bit. We also learn about the Swede, who is someone from Sweden or of Swedish descent. Notice how he cheerily responds, even though he's being asked about Lutkins. But then, there's hesitation. Fritz hesitates before finally admitting he saw Lutkins earlier today, which shows he was a bit unsure or reluctant to share information. This scene highlights the theme of proceeding cautiously when trying to gather information, especially when deception might be involved. Bill's approach is cheerful, but Fritz is hesitant, which reflects the uncertain and sometimes deceptive nature of these interactions. The key point here is how people's responses can reveal their true feelings or intentions. Sometimes they're honest, sometimes not. And this ties back to the overall theme of deception and how appearances can be misleading. It's a good reminder that in these situations, reading between the lines is important. Well, I ought to go home to the wife. I don't care much for these restaurants, only 4 of them, and they're all bad. Tell you what we'll do. We'll get the wife to pack up a lunch for us. She won't charge you more than $50, and it would cost you more for a greasy meal in a restaurant. And you know what? We'll go up to Wade's Hill and enjoy the view while we eat. How about something to eat? I suggested. Let's go to a restaurant and I'll buy you lunch. As we climbed back into the hack, Bill concluded that since Lutkins had exhausted his credit at Gustav's, he had probably gone to Gray for a shave. At Gray's barber shop, we missed Lutkins by only 5 minutes. He had just left, probably headed for the pool room. At the pool room, it looked like he had just bought a pack of cigarettes and then gone out. So we kept pursuing him, just behind him but never catching him, for an hour, until it was past 1 o'clock. I was hungry, but honestly, I had enjoyed Bill's rough country opinions about his neighbors so much that I scarcely cared whether I found Lutkins or not. This story highlights how sometimes, even with a clear goal, the pursuit can become secondary to the enjoyment of the journey or the company. It also shows how exhaustion and curiosity can blend, making the chase less about catching someone and more about the experience itself. He noticed everything, but no matter how much he might laugh at people, he also understood and forgave their foolishness. He described the minister's wife who sang the loudest in church when she was most in debt. He commented on the boys who came back from college in fancy clothes. He told about the lawyer whose wife could never succeed in getting him to put on both a collar and a tie on the same day. He made them all live. On that day, I came to know New Mullion better than I did the city and to love it better. But it would have been worth paying him myself to have his presence. His cheerful country wisdom was very refreshing to a country boy like me who was sick of the city. As we sat on the hilltop, looking over the pastures and creek which slipped among the trees, he talked of New Mullion and painted a picture in words of all the people in it. I know that Bill's helpfulness to the young fellow from the city was not entirely a matter of brotherly love. I was paying him for his time. In the end, I paid him for 6 hours, including the lunch hour, at what was then a very high price. But he was no more dishonest than I charged the whole thing to the firm. So I don't know anything about Oliver, and I really don't want to, she shouted. We then drove into a poor farmyard, and right there, we were met with an enormous, cheerful old woman. My guide, Bill Magnusson, bravely approached her and said, "Remember me? I'm Bill Magnusson, the carter and hackman. I want to find your son, Oliver." Bill then sighed and said he knew Oliver's mother. He described her as a terror, explaining that once he took a trunk out to her and she nearly took his skin off because he didn't treat it gently, like a box of eggs. He painted a vivid picture, She's about 9 feet tall, 4 feet thick, quick as a cat, and she sure can talk. Bill guessed that Oliver probably heard someone was after him and went to hide behind his mother's skirts. He suggested we try her, but he also warned that he should handle it because, while I might be good at literature and law, I haven't had real training in swearing. We left that peaceful scene of meadows and woods and continued our search for Oliver Lutkins, but we couldn't find him. Eventually, Bill cornered a friend of Oliver's and got him to admit that Oliver had gone out to his mother's farm, about 3 miles north. So we drove out there and started making plans. It's important to note that Bill didn't know much about colleges or cities, but he had traveled extensively and worked various jobs across the country. From those experiences, he developed a philosophy based on simplicity and laughter, which really strengthened me during this process. This part of the story highlights the importance of practical knowledge and the value of experience in solving problems, especially in unfamiliar situations. It also ties into the overall theme of the presentation, how different kinds of knowledge and character traits can help us navigate challenges effectively. Now we examined the barn and the stable. Our suspicion was that Lutkins wasn't there. As it was nearing the time for my afternoon train, Bill kindly drove me to the station. At one point, Bill leaned in and whispered, "Let's get out of here, she'll murder us." Outside, he added, "Did you see her smile? She was laughing at us." I agreed. Her behavior was pretty disrespectful and it made us feel unwelcome. Despite that, we decided to search the house. Since it was only 1 story high, Bill circled around it, peering carefully into all the windows. Meanwhile, Bill really made me sound important, impressing the woman, who then went inside to the kitchen, and we followed. Suddenly, she seized an iron from the old-fashioned stove and marched toward us shouting. She warned us, "You search all you want to if you don't mind getting burnt first." Her shouting and laughter at our frightened retreat showed her defiance. At this point, I had to clarify our position. I said, "Now, look here. We've had just about enough nonsense. This young man here represents the court in the city, and we have a legal right to search all properties for Oliver Lutkins." This scene underscores the tension between us and the local residents, and highlights how authority and disrespect can clash in such situations. It also ties into our overall theme of understanding the importance of proper procedure and respect when conducting investigations. So on this slide, I want to clarify some of the words and ideas that are key to understanding this part of the story. First, shameful means disgraceful or something that makes you feel ashamed. Promising is hopeful, suggesting a sense of potential or future success. When I say hinted, I mean to suggest or give a little clue about something. And digging refers to the act of tilling or turning over the earth, often for farming or trench work. Ditches are basically trenches or drains, long, narrow excavations in the ground. Loafing means spending time idly, doing little or nothing productive. Now, what's happening here is quite intense. The chief almost killed me, and he hinted that I might do well at digging ditches, which was not exactly a compliment, but more like an order. I was sent back to New Mullion, along with a man who had worked with Lutkins. I was a bit sad because this meant I couldn't spend my time loafing around with Bill anymore. But here's the important part. While I didn't think much about Lutkins at first, the office definitely did. They were all upset because the next day, Lutkins was going to be in court, and they needed him. I felt like a shameful, useless fool because my promising legal career was almost over before it even started. It was a real wake-up call. On the way to the city, I didn't worry too much about not finding Lutkins. Instead, I was thinking about Bill Magnuson. Honestly, I started considering returning to New Mullion to practice law, but not just for the profession itself. I realized that Bill was so deep and richly human. He showed me a different, more genuine side of life. I began to imagine loving Fritz, Gustav, and all the other simple, wise neighbors I'd meet there. I pictured a life that was honest and happy, beyond the strict confines of universities and law firms. I was excited because I had discovered something valuable, a treasure, really. I found a new way of living, one that felt more real and meaningful to me, which ties into the overall theme of seeking authenticity and fulfillment beyond traditional success. So on this slide, we see how Lutkins and his mother reacted to me. They begged me to go with them to a neighbor's house for a cup of coffee, showing their friendly, almost playful nature. It's interesting because, despite the earlier teasing and laughter when I served the summons, they now displayed warmth and kindness. Lutkins told his folks about me, and they were eager to see me, mentioning I was one of the few in town who hadn't seen him the day before. This shows how well-connected and familiar everyone is in this small community. Then there's a key moment when I describe Bill arriving at the station in New Mullion. He's standing near his cart, and surprisingly, Lutkins' mother is there talking and laughing with him, completely at ease, not quarrelsome like before. I pointed Bill out to my companion from the train steps, saying, "There's a fine fellow, a real man." And I emphasized how I spent the entire day with him, which highlights Bill's genuine character and the importance of first impressions. Overall, this part underscores how appearances and assumptions can be misleading, and it connects to the larger theme of understanding people beyond surface impressions. Let's take a moment to review the key points from this section. First, it's important to remember that understanding these core ideas helps us see the bigger picture of our project. These points are the foundation upon which everything else is built. Next, I want to emphasize how each point connects to our overall theme, whether that's improving efficiency, enhancing customer experience, or driving innovation. Recognizing these connections makes the information more meaningful and actionable. Finally, keep in mind that mastering these key points enables us to make informed decisions and implement strategies more effectively. So, as we move forward, let's keep these concepts at the forefront of our minds. Let's continue exploring the story. The lawyer shows him the helpful hack driver, and together they visit Lutkins' home. There, they meet Lutkins' mother, who frightens them away, highlighting how intimidating and unwelcoming the environment can be. Earlier, at the station, a helpful hack driver offers to take the lawyer in his cart to find Lutkin, demonstrating the importance of local knowledge and resourcefulness. The next day, the chief sends the lawyer back with a man who claims to know Lutkin, hopping to locate him more effectively. Despite their efforts, they do not find Lutkin, but the lawyer is still happy to encounter such a friendly and helpful man, which shows how human kindness can shine through even in failure. This encounter gives the lawyer a chance to serve a summons in a village, an opportunity that would have been unlikely without the help of the local guide. However, when he finally serves the summons to Oliver Lutkin, the situation turns embarrassing and somewhat humorous, as Lutkin laughs at the lawyer, making the task more difficult. Afterward, the lawyer returns to the city, feeling disappointed, especially since his chief is angry about his failure to find Lutkin. His companion then reveals that the hack driver was, in fact, Oliver Lutkin himself, which is a surprising twist in the story. He shows the lawyer around the village and describes the rural life, contrasting it with city life and emphasizing the different worlds they inhabit. The story also highlights that serving summons was a dirty and dangerous job, often entrusted to those willing to undertake such tasks. In fact, the lawyer ends up paying the hack driver for 6 hours of work, illustrating the costs involved in such field work. The driver had taken him all over, trying to locate Lutkin, but ultimately failed, demonstrating how difficult and unpredictable these searches can be. To give some background, the narrator mentions that he completed his law graduation and joined a big firm as a junior assistant clerk, setting the stage for his perspective on the case. Overall, this story underscores the importance of local knowledge, the unpredictability of fieldwork, and how appearances can be deceiving, all within the broader theme of understanding human nature and the realities faced by legal professionals.